Hey there, I'm Brianna, and I'll be reviewing my other classmate speeches. I watched my group's videos multiple times and took notes of each one. I feel like this is a good exercise to get peers to comment on our speeches. The audience tends to notice things about speakers that we may be unaware of. We could all use a little help when becoming public speakers. For the first speech I watched and took notes on was Addison. Some things I noticed about her video was she had picked a good place for her background. Her background wasn't too distracting and didn't take away from her video. Secondly, she showed a good difference with her tones of voice. She wasn't too monotone, and I was able to easily follow along with what she was saying. Some things she could work on could be her body movement. She tended to use her arms a lot when I felt it was unnecessary. It was a little distracting throughout her speech. Another thing I would suggest is better body placement. I feel like her speech video could have been better with her placed a little bit closer to the camera, but overall her introduction was good and covered a decent amount about things that she's interested in and what she's associated with. The second speech I watched and took notes on in my group was Jarek's. To start off, he had a good volume throughout the length of his video. His words were clear and understood. He wasn't monotone, and I was able to easily pay attention. Another thing I noticed was he didn't have unnecessary body movements. His hand movements seemed controlled and wasn't overdone. Something he could work on for his next speech is his transition language. He tended to use the terms and a lot throughout his speech. This is natural when talking, but he needs to be sure not to accidentally use these phrases too often. Overall, he gave a good speech and an introduction of himself, and it gave me a good sense of his background and his field of work and study. The last speech I took notes on was Jace's speech. Throughout his speech, he had a good speaking pace, and I could keep up with what he was getting across. His tone was good too. It didn't sound too monotone, and you could hear the change of his expressions. He didn't have unnecessary body movements throughout, and it wasn't distracting or taking away from his speech. I would say he could have had a better body placement for his speech. He seemed far away, and it seemed like there was a lot of background behind him, which can take away from what he's trying to get across and say. Another thing would be the background noise. Even though he had a good volume, the background noise tended to be distracting, and that could take away from the video. He seemed to be fighting the background noise when he was talking. Overall, he had a good speech, and it helped give me more insight to what's important to him. Thank you. I hope these tips are helpful.